The world is watching with their ears.
Well, Jeff, here we are at the end of the road with the Emma Woods-David Jacobs affair as far as this show is concerned. Is that fair to say?
That's a good thing, yes.
Case closed after this, unless David Jacobs or the mysterious Elizabeth would like to step forward and come on the show. Pretty much case closed for us on this.
Yeah, I would say unless Dr. Jacobs wants to come on the show, that's pretty much it. I mean, I think that's the only puzzle piece to me that hasn't been filled in, and I say this knowing what's coming up on the show and having lived that already, so that pretty much filled in the blanks for me.
Well, I guess let's not draw out this intro too much. I mean, essentially, Brian Reed, which is another pseudonym, but once again, we know who he is, we know his real name, we know his background, so we're not just accepting testimony blindly from an anonymous source. He is not anonymous to us.
Right.
Friend of the family of Jacobs, or the reverse is true. Jacobs is a friend of his family. His mom figured in heavily into Jacobs' work. I believe The Secret Life, not so much The Threat, and was friends with Elizabeth. I don't know. We pretty much cover the background, so we don't need to cover all this. It's just interesting because, you know, he's not a distant voice from a foreign land. He's a friend of the family who has known David Jacobs for most of his life. So, interesting. We'll have a lot to say. I think Jeff and I probably have a disagreement as to the importance of this new information. I think it's fair to say you don't think it's as important as I do. But maybe that's because I'm still gobsmacked by how clear it is after this. Not just the Jacobs thing, but the fact that hypnosis is being abused in so many ways in this field. I mean, by Brian Reed. Let's not kid ourselves. And he admits to this. I mean, I'm not speaking out of school here. Anyway, is there more to say, or we'll just save that for the after chat?
Well, I think we can. I mean, I don't want to give the impression I don't feel that what Brian has to say is unimportant. It's, I think it's more along the lines of this is kind of confirming what I more or less thought or suspected was going on at the time. And I think what's valuable here is that this kind of, for me at least, in my opinion, fills in the gaps of what we didn't get so much from Emma, because I think there are certain aspects that seemed a little bit hazy to me as far as connecting the dots here. And I think Brian very well connects those dots now, at least in my mind, for the bigger picture of what actually happened. And I think that listeners will get a better sense of what went down if you can kind of listen to these shows next to each other, pretty much the Emma interview and this one. I think you'll get a better sense of actually what the dynamic was that was going on here, and it's pretty much what I had suspected. So that was the part I wasn't surprised at. I'll put it to you that way. As far as value goes, well, I think we'll get to that afterwards. As far as the pinnacle point that you're referring to.
All right. Without further ado, here is our interview with Brian Reed. Paratopia, without further ado, please welcome our very special anonymous guest, Brian Reed. Brian, thank you very much for sort of coming out with this and validating some of the things that Emma's saying and being another brave voice in this battle against hypnosis, really, as far as Jeff and I are concerned, I think.
Yeah, right on, guys. I appreciate you having me on. Just looking forward to talking about it. And it's not something that people really have been talking a lot about, especially in public eyes, so I think it'd be pretty interesting.
Well, why don't you let us know who you are, just sort of start at the beginning, with your mother, I guess. What was her relationship to this phenomenon, and then how did she get involved with Jacobs, and we'll just sort of take it from there.
As far as I know, I haven't really... I knew Dr. Jacobs was around since I was a kid, so I'm not quite sure how they met. But I know that my mom and Dr. Jacobs had been very, very close most of my life, and so I've known him. I've seen him here and there as a child. And that I didn't really get involved with him until I was a little bit older. But yeah, I mean, him and my mom had a good relationship. It wasn't just a subject and researcher. I mean, they were friends, and they would call each other on birthdays and that kind of stuff. And he'd check in and see if we were doing well. And he's helped out my family and that kind of stuff a couple of times. So it wasn't just like I said, it wasn't like a strict professional relationship. It was a bit personal as well.
And so I assume that was after she must have gone to him because she thought that she was being abducted by aliens or something, and then
right,
went to him.
Yeah. I'm not quite. Honestly, I never even thought to ask how she met up with him and all that stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, they initially met through the abduction phenomenon and her approaching him about hypnosis and looking at her experiences.
Okay, and so you were raised to believe what about yourself and what about your mother or your family?
It was one of those things where I kind of discovered it on my own, in the sense that as a child, I had seen some really crazy things. I can go into detail about some of those things if you'd like. But as far as abductees go, a lot of people don't necessarily recall a lot of stuff that happens. They remember them in, dreams, or in just all of a sudden it kind of hits them. They remember it. As a child, a lot of the stuff that I saw and experienced were things that I saw consciously and was aware of. I haven't gotten that so much as an adult as I did as a child. But so I had, when I was just young, I saw some weird things. I saw, beings in the hallway. I remember floating down some steps and all that, and discussing that with my mom. She had already believed in the UFO phenomenon, and that was kind of her way of explaining it to me, was just through the phenomenon itself. So I was introduced to it at a pretty young age.
So she hadn't talked to you about this stuff prior to you going and telling her what was happening with you?
No, I mean, I don't think she really made an effort to make it part of our lives. I believe it was more so us, me and my younger sister approaching her and talking to her about it, and then using what she knows as an explanation for it.
Okay, and so did you see any stress on her part? I mean, in terms of this whole hybrid thing, being involved with Jacobs and knowing eventually what you came to know about, well, his thinking on all of this. Did you see signs of that with your mother? Was she stressed out about I don't know, hybrid aliens or evil aliens or any of that sort of stuff?
She had gotten out of the field when her health started going down. She's very sick, and that was right when the hybrid stuff started really coming out and was really kind of prominent in the UFO research field. She was a big part of the first book that Dr. Jacobs had done, and I think she was somewhat involved in the threat, the second one. But after that, when the hybrid stuff got really intense, she wasn't so much involved. She wasn't doing hypnosis or anything like that. So as far as the hybrid stuff in particular, she wasn't too big on that. So yeah, I mean, she may have seen like early stage hybrids, according to what Dr. Jacobs has come up with, or something like that, but not the beating you up hybrids, the human ones.
Right. Okay. And so at what point did you decide to check out your own situation through hypnosis?
Let me think. I remember that I was having some experiences at the time. I was having very strange dreams. And like I said, my mother had stopped working with Dr. Jacobs. But I started having like just really odd dreams that had to do with, certain things that do with the phenomenon. Remember, like I said, as a child, I really experienced a lot of interesting things and saw a lot of bright lights and, all the stuff that goes with being an abductee. But then through my teenage years, I didn't experience that so much. And then some of it started kind of coming back in the form of dreams and, sleep, like waking up paralyzed and just some weird stuff, nothing concrete in that it was definitely the UFO phenomenon, but stuff that made me think. And as I talked to my mother about it, she kind of reintroduced me to the whole phenomenon, and then I was inspired to contact Dr. Jacobs. So that's what I did. I got a hold of him through email, and we talked for a little bit. I told him I was interested in doing hypnosis, and he was rather reluctant to work with me at first, just because I was so young. But eventually he was okay with it, and then we began doing some sessions.
Just as a sort of a tangential question, you know,
Sure.
looking back on those initial things that happened to you, the snippets of memory that you do have, if nobody told you it was aliens, does any of what you remember experiencing strike you as aliens, or does it seem, I don't know, like that maybe doesn't cover it?
Honestly, I can't say, because even though I was conscious during remembering those things, if no one had mentioned aliens to me, my first guess wouldn't have been aliens per se. But it's, you know, I guess if someone would have told me they're ghosts and then showed me a bunch of information and said that these were ghosts, you know, I probably would have bought into that. Now, I did read a lot into the phenomenon itself, and reading some of the things that people in the phenomenon had experienced and been through, I saw some congruencies there. But at the same time, you know, I don't necessarily know how that works, because, I mean, the whole thing is just so beyond our minds that I couldn't tell you if there's even really a phenomenon going on, or if it's something about the human psyche, or what it is exactly. But I do know that some of the things I saw fit into what others had described that were also abductees.
Hey, Brian, can I just jump in here 1 second?
Sure.
I'm sure that there's one particular event in your life, as most people do. They have one particular interaction with this thing that was the most potent. Can you walk us through what you feel would be the most potent reaction or event that you had with this?
As far as my experiences themselves?
As far as an experience, yeah.
The most traumatic one that I remember was, I was probably, I would have to say 10 years old or something like that. And I was lying down in bed, and it was just a kind of a weird, just there's a weird vibe in the room. It's something I can't necessarily explain in words, but just the room felt different. And I was lying down, and I saw 3 or 4 beings. It was really blurry. I call them beings because that's what I interpreted them as, but I can't really explain what they looked like. They were just like blurry figures, and I saw them walk through my bedroom wall, and I saw a flash of white light, and then I was out, and I woke up the next morning. That was the most intense thing I had seen, and that was absolutely terrifying for being as young as I was. And I recall the next day I had a friend sleep over that night, and I remember talking to my family and stuff, and while mine was the most intense, everyone seemed to have had an odd night that night.
Would you, the feeling, I mean, I'm really interested in when you described that the feeling in the room changed. Would you attribute that to like a surrealistic feel, or would you kind of lean the other way and go, it felt like doom?
It's hard to explain. I guess the best way to put it was it almost felt like I was in another reality. Just my body didn't feel the same, and I felt like it felt like a presence in the room, even though I didn't even see anything quite yet until they walked through the walls. I could just feel a presence in the room that was just foreign. Okay.
And you say everybody that night had something go on. Just for my own personal curiosity, at that point in your life or that of your families, was there any kind of major change going on, you know, within the household or within the family unit at all?
I can't say it was exactly at that moment, but I know that when I was living at that house, it wasn't but within 2 years or so that my parents had gotten divorced.
Okay.
So my parents, and it was a really ugly divorce too. So that was
likely,
somewhere around it.
Yeah, likely there was some kind of stress going on as far as that goes, you know.
I mean, I'm not sure how it's related, but if you're asking, there must be something.
Well, I mean, how long had you been in the house when that?
I honestly couldn't tell you, but it was. I mean, I know that one of my best friends was over, and I was. It took a while for me to live there and him to become my best friend, so we probably were there for about a year.
Okay. Is this a single family home or an apartment?
It was like a townhouse in the city.
Townhouse. Okay. All right, Jer, if you want to.
Sure. So you go to see Jacobs. You undergo hypnosis. What is that process like for you?
It's different every time, actually. Like I would be one of the people that you consider to be more difficult to hypnotize. The first time I did it, I was really, really under, and I was very, very hypnotized because I recall that as I was going through my memories and my thoughts and everything like that, that I could actually feel what I was feeling when I was looking at the memories. For instance, if I was crying in the vision I was seeing, I would start crying physically, and that was the most under I've ever been. Every time after that, it wasn't quite as intense. But while you're under hypnosis, it's kind of weird. It almost feels like you're kind of lost in space and time, and all you can hear is the voice of Dr. Jacobs talking to you. And while he's talking to you, he's saying, asking you questions about a certain event, and as he asks the questions, your mind kind of picks up with the answer for it and kind of shows it in front of you. Sometimes it's more difficult than other times. But I remember, it's almost weird because when you're under hypnosis, you don't realize just how out of consciousness you are until you wake up. And I remember I would wake up and it would just feel almost like a shock to me because it just didn't seem like I was that out of it. But yeah, you do let go of the conscious mind pretty well.
When you wake up, do you have those as memories? I mean, do you have the sense that what you remembered is not confabulation? I mean, not now looking back at it, but then did you wake up and go, oh my God, that was a real memory, as opposed to, oh my God, I just imagined something to present to the therapist because he was asking me questions?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't know. It's probably different from person to person, but for me, I always kind of second guessed myself, and I was always thinking, did that really happen? Did that really happen? And when I guess, well, as soon as I got out of the hypnosis, I would have a conversation with Dr. Jacobs about it, and then we'd analyze it, and certain things would seem to make sense with things that are going on in my life at the time. You know what I mean? So it's almost like we kind of put the pieces together, and it made it attached to reality a bit more, because things like, for instance, I had woken up one day with a scratch on my head. I didn't know where it came from, and then through the hypnosis session, I kind of figured it out, and it made sense, if you understand what I mean. So, I mean, there were certain things that would confirm it. There were certain things where I just couldn't tell if I was making it up or not. There are certain times where you just don't know.
And was he uncertain at times whether or not you were making things up, or did he seem to have a handle on all of it?
There are certain times where he wouldn't really let you know, and there were other times where you could tell that he really believed that that's what was going on. I guess it all depends on what the event was. He was a bit more skeptical when I first started working with him as opposed to later on.
And how many sessions did you undergo?
I believe 5 with him. I did other sessions at home, but not with him.
Huh. Okay, and so you're going through this now. Are you feeling like you're getting some benefit out of this as far as therapy goes? Do you feel better about what's going on in your life? How does it help you?
Well, the only benefit that I gotten from it at the time was that it made some sense, so to speak, out of what I was going through, as far as seeing weird things and not understanding, why these things were happening to me, and not understanding what I was seeing. It put a story behind it, if you know what I mean. It made it so that those things made sense to me at the time and all that. But there were, honestly, I would say, and this isn't a personal knock to Dr. Jacobs. I'm just saying for me personally, I was happier not doing it when I think back to it. It was not really therapeutic for me. In fact, it just added more stress to me, if anything, because your life changes when you go through something like that, and you start to see life in a whole different perspective, and you add a whole other dimension to it when you're talking about extraterrestrial beings being involved in your life. I mean, it's pretty intense, and it's not something you can really talk to everybody about.
Right. Well, in terms of this stuff with Jacobs, where did it go south for you? Where did you I know that somehow Elizabeth was involved. What was her involvement? I guess let's try to flesh out that piece of it.
Yeah, it's a pretty complicated story.
Because you've only had 5 hypnosis sessions with him, so I don't how is it that she was so egregious that it woke you up out of all of this?
Well, as far as my experience with Dr. Jacobs and Elizabeth, I mean, most of what has gone on with me and stuff, not really just what I went through as a research subject, but I also went through as a researcher and just the personal relationships. Like I said, I had done many other hypnosis sessions, just not with them. I'm sorry, not with Dr. Jacobs. But I guess the story kind of starts off with I actually had some dates written down because I wanted to remember this. I'd gotten into contact with Elizabeth in early 2007, and I had started hypnosis Dr. Jacobs in late 2006. So I believe I had gotten Elizabeth's contact information from my mother. I could be wrong, but I know that before I had started my hypnosis sessions, Dr. Jacobs had spoken to Elizabeth about me, just kind of wanted to get her opinion on whether I was too young or whatever. And so I wanted to have more people to talk to regarding this whole subject because it's such a taboo topic, and it's really hard to find people that would even believe you if you talk to them about it. So I contacted Elizabeth, and then her and I began having conversations, just talking about just abductions and her experiences and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, we went back and forth, and I guess our relationship got tighter when Dr. Jacobs had told us that he could no longer be doing hypnosis sessions with Elizabeth and I.
But you knew Elizabeth beforehand because your mom was friends with her, right?
Right. I mean, they weren't like really close friends, but they were, you know, they talked every once in a while or send Christmas cards, that kind of thing. When my mother got sick, she didn't really stay in as much contact with her as she had.
Okay. And so explain to us how it is that you became better friends because you couldn't work together. Is that what you just said? Right.
Oh, because Dr. Jacobs was no longer interested in doing regressions with Elizabeth and I.
Okay.
And so, I mean, basically, I can give you kind of the backstory behind that. I mean, I'm not sure how much you guys went over with Emma, but basically, Dr. Jacobs had gotten afraid that Elizabeth's hybrids were after him, and it was kind of an ongoing thing that was going on. And then I guess Dr. Jacobs had gotten to a point where he felt comfortable with where he was at to a certain degree, and didn't feel the need to look into Elizabeth's memories because he had, all right, I'm sorry. He'd initially done it with Elizabeth. Like he didn't want to keep doing it, but he did because he wanted to know what her hybrids were doing because they had made threats towards him.
Right.
And so he informed me himself that he was only working with Elizabeth for that reason alone. And once he felt that he was in an okay place, he didn't feel like he was in danger, he thought that he would just stop hypnosis with both her and I. I'm not entirely sure why I was lumped into that, only because I really, at that point, I had not seen anything like that would in any means threaten him. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure this is right. I have to look at my files, but I'm pretty sure that during her hybrid conversations with Dr. Jacobs that they had threatened him about working with me. And so he just wanted to get out of it at that point and then said that he wasn't going to work with either of us. So as a result of that, Elizabeth and I began speaking more. Mm-hmm. And through that we became closer friends, and because I had done a number of hypnosis sessions myself as far as being the researcher, the conversations began turning towards that and towards playing with the idea of me putting her under hypnosis.
So much there, but let me ask you this first. When you first heard about hybrid instant messages, what did you think? Did you think that was realistic at all?
I didn't believe it at first. I really didn't. But you have to remember that going into this, I was pretty naive to the subject. I didn't know much about it. All I knew was that I knew Dr. Jacobs as one of the, leading researchers on UFOs and the phenomenon, and I trusted his opinion more than I trusted mine when it came to that. And so I'm embarrassed to say that I actually believed him for a bit. I'm embarrassed to say it, but it's true. So yeah, I mean, I believe that it was going on. At first, I really was skeptical about it, but I trusted his judgment. I figured he would know better than I did, and so yeah, I just kind of took his word for it.
Okay, and so at what point did you stop trusting him or stop trusting Elizabeth?
This is very complicated, but I'll try to explain the best I can. Okay, so anyway, I was working with Elizabeth. We were doing IM hypnosis sessions, which I didn't like at first either. But basically, I remember I talked to...
Wait. You were doing instant message hypnosis sessions?
Yes, that's what Dr. Jacobs was doing with Elizabeth.
So not even not telephone hypnosis?
No, she was the only person I ever did that with, and it didn't last very long.
Well, wait a second. Maybe we're missing something here. When you say that you did it, you mean that you performed it on Elizabeth?
Right.
Who trained you to do hypnosis?
I wasn't certified to do it. I just kind of picked up from what I learned from Dr. Jacobs, and I'd done a lot of reading on it.
Did you tell him that you were doing this?
He knew.
And he was cool with it?
He was just happy to not have to deal with her hybrids.
Okay. All right. So, how does one do hypnosis through instant message?
Well, I had been sent by Elizabeth some copies of ones that she did with Dr. Jacobs, and it was pretty much the same type of deal. Basically, just being typed out, and yeah, it was pretty much the same thing. I'd done 18 of them with her, and so yeah, I mean, basically that was what was going on. I would just type the things, type the questions, and all of that, and she says it worked, and so I just kind of went along with that.
Am I allowed to ask how old you were at the time that you were doing that?
21.
And how old was she?
40-something.
Huh. All right.
I know.
I know. But this is the life that you're living. This is all making sense to you because you're indoctrinated into this, and it completely makes sense to me.
I was absolutely engulfed in the whole thing, and like I said to you before, I mean, when I look back on it, I'm really embarrassed that it even happened. That I even thought like that. But when you first get involved in the subject, you get so involved, it becomes such a huge part of your life, and you feel so different from everybody. And honestly, like you just start to trust people in the field too much. And like I trusted Elizabeth way too much to start off. But like I said, I mean, she was like the top-notch prized abductee for Dr. Jacobs, and he trusted her, so I didn't see any reason why I shouldn't. And as crazy as an instant message might sound to me at the time, it didn't seem so crazy because I was so engulfed in the phenomenon. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I mean, as we I think both agree and told Emma, I think when you get sort of involved in that whole Dungeons and Dragons aspect of this stuff, I think it's kind of a miracle that you come out of it at all. So.
How do you mean?
Well, I mean, it sounds crazy to the outside world to think, well, gee, how could you believe that? But really, when you're that involved in it and you do believe it, I think it's amazing that you were able to even step back at some point and go, wait a minute, something's wrong here.
Well, that's what happened, because that's when I figured out that it was all BS. Because I just took a step back and I'm like, wait, this is way too ridiculous. And then I took steps to find out that it was all just a mess and it wasn't true. But I don't even know how you want me to get there, because there's a lot of stuff I could talk about.
Well, let's go with what was the initial thing with Elizabeth where you said, okay, this can't be happening, this isn't real. She's pulling the wool over my eyes.
Now you have to understand, when I first got into this whole thing, I had heard from Elizabeth right away that Dr. Jacobs was afraid, and he was afraid for his safety and all of that, because at some point during his instant message regressions with Elizabeth, that at some point a hybrid had taken over a computer and spoke to him directly, threatening him. Are you there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I just got quiet. Yeah, so he
it's stunned silence. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. He just felt threatened. I don't remember exactly what they said or whatever it was said to him. But I just know that the general gist was he had to stop doing hypnosis. He had to stop doing his research and all of that stuff, or else they were going to monitor him and keep an eye on him and get him and that kind of stuff. So I know that he was pretty afraid of that, and that all was going on right when I kind of jumped into the scene. So with that being said, he had these hybrid chats every so often with Elizabeth. And yeah, so I guess when Elizabeth and I started talking, it inevitably happened in the conversations that her and I were having. And then these so-called hybrids would come on and speak to me through IM. Not every time, but pretty frequently.
And did you believe that they were hybrids at the time, or?
I was really skeptical at first, and then I kind of let my gut go. I trusted Elizabeth very much. I mean, I hadn't just talked to her online. I had seen her in person. I talked to her on the phone, and she was a longtime friend of my mother's, and she was a longtime friend of Dr. Jacobs. I didn't really have a reason not to believe her. And like I said, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but at the time, that's just what it was. And I'll put it this way: I wouldn't tell my friends, but I believed it. I believed it to a degree, and so basically through these hybrid chats, we would just talk. I would talk to these so-called hybrids, and it turned into like a little game where it's really, really complicated. I was pretending to be a different person because she had advised to me that I should be somebody different, so that way they didn't know it was actually me, Brian, that was doing it. You see what I mean? So yeah. I pretended to be someone named Mark, and in doing that, I would just talk to the hybrids, and they would want. It was really ridiculous. They would ask me a question, I would ask them a question. It was kind of an agreed upon format, and through doing that, just things started to click with me that this is just too ridiculous. There's no way, and then that's when I kind of took steps to find out the truth.
What kind of questions were you asking, and what kind of replies were you getting back? If you can remember any of them, it's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I have it all on my computer. I'm trying to remember exactly. Like, I would ask. Oh, I'm trying to think of specifics. Like, I would ask about like certain, let's say, procedures they would do, and they would answer typically, "Oh, that is not for us to answer. That involves the ones above us." Or it was all very, very vague.
Cryptic stuff. Okay.
Yeah, kind of like that. You know, and you'd ask the basics, what's the purpose of the phenomenon, and all that kind of stuff. And then, then things started kind of taking a really wild turn, if it hasn't taken a wild turn already. In that, all of a sudden, I'm speaking to these hybrids, and then this other little hybrid all of a sudden starts to talk to me, and all of a sudden he starts having feelings and stuff, and is relating to the human condition and all that. I didn't buy a lot of that, and that was right around the time where I figured out it was all not true.
So you figure out that it's not true, and do you confront her? I know that you tried to accumulate, or did accumulate, evidence to present to Dr. Jacobs that she wasn't telling the truth. You know,
right.
What was that process?
Here's basically how I did it. I mean, there were numerous things that I did. For instance, I tried to death to get her to use a web camera, because like we'd be in the middle of talking, and all of a sudden she'd disappear, and all of a sudden, you know, these hybrids would get on, and so I got her to turn on the microphone one time, and while the microphone was on, you know, all of a sudden I just hear these loud bangs, and then nothing. It was all silence. And then I was like, look, all right, so you're willing to use the microphone, you're willing to fight this. Can you please set up a web camera? Because I really needed that confirmation. And it kind of got to the point where, oh, don't you trust me kind of thing and all that. But, I mean, I had asked her to use the web camera, and each time she would tell me, oh, I can't use the web camera because it's not working, or I don't have the CD, or, whatever it was. She just kept giving me different reasons for it. And that really kind of made me think, like, okay, something's not right here. Because if you're willing to do the microphone thing, if you're willing to say you're going through all this hardship in the name of research, then why aren't you willing to try setting up a web camera? And so she didn't do that. And then what I had done was I kind of, since the whole hybrid thing, I could ask a question, they would ask a question or whatever, I kind of set it up so that I would ask a question that had nothing to do with the phenomenon or things that were going on. And I figured if I got an answer that seemed like a reasonable answer, if it actually was part of the phenomenon, then I know it was her typing it. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I did that, and I caught her. And so what happened was I just typed, I'm like, look, I'm not playing this game anymore. This is ridiculous. And then I got an email message from her account saying it was the hybrids, saying, oh, I'm sorry, what did I do? It was like the one that had feelings and all that kind of stuff. It was
Mac from Mac and Me?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous, and all that. And then I got an email from her the next day saying, oh, I don't know what happened last night. Everything on my computer got deleted and all that kind of stuff, so I'd like to talk to you with you soon. And at that point, I sent her a long email, just kind of letting go and just freaking out. And then I also done something else too, where I had noticed that, like, if I was on Instant Messenger, and whenever she would, whenever the hybrid chats were done, she would sign off. And then, so that I used to sign off all the time. But then I thought about it, because she's always online at night. So what I did was, instead of signing off, I went on as invisible. And then as soon as I went off as invisible, she came back on and put up an away message about just something stupid, like something about the beach or something like that. So I was like, oh, there you go. And so with all of that, I had caught her. And the real significance of that is because she tried to manipulate me in the same way she had tried to manipulate Dr. Jacobs, except for she was actually more successful with him, because she really, really wanted control of this man. And this is where I might differ on some people's opinion of Dr. Jacobs, in that I don't think he's a crazy guy. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he got played and he fell for it and all that. Because the woman seemed to be obsessed with him. And I mean, that's just my opinion. I don't have any actual real things, like real evidence to say this is her saying she's obsessed, but I got that vibe. And for instance, in some of her hypnosis sessions, she would see, go through one of the sexual experiences through with the hybrids, and all of a sudden one time she saw Dr. Jacobs' face there. You know what I mean? And she constantly wanted his attention. And it's just kind of convenient that whenever somebody got really close to him, all of a sudden her hybrids were telling him that, oh, he can't talk to them, it's bad news. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What was his reaction when you accumulated your evidence and you sent it to him? What did he say?
Nothing. And I had a mountain of evidence too, because, I mean, if you just look at it practically, I mean, even if you believe in the phenomenon, it's just her stories and everything was just so intense and so big and just so, there's so much going on that it's like a fantasy. You know what I mean? And for instance, she had sessions where she would see myself and Emma and Dr. Jacobs on board a UFO and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was just really out there stuff you'd read in, or you see in like a Hollywood movie or something. It was just too broad. And like, if you think about the phenomenon logically, if you go off the premise that was created by Dr. Jacobs and Bud Hopkins and stuff like that, it doesn't fit into all that because it's too extreme. The logic behind it wouldn't have Elizabeth's hybrids having anything to do with me or anything to do with Dr. Jacobs or anything to do with Emma. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
it was too much. And then we found out later that she's also she writes fantasy stories like on the internet. Emma had pointed that out to me, and at first I didn't think it was that significant, but the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know what, that's kind of what's going on here, is that she's just kind of acting out fantasies that she has. And there's an obvious attempt to control and manipulate Dr. Jacobs. And for instance, she had me compiling all the evidence that I could, and she was doing the same thing to prove to Dr. Jacobs that the aliens had taken over his mind and they had control of him. And my honest opinion is that, if you think about it, because remember, Dr. Jacobs had told me himself that he didn't really want to work with Elizabeth anymore, but he was doing so for his own safety, to know what they were doing. And so by keeping him afraid, she kept him near her. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. How long of a duration did this go on for?
What, with Elizabeth and Dr. Jacobs?
And you?
Trying to think. I mean, really, I'd done about 18 sessions with Elizabeth over the span. I mean, it took me about like 3 to 4 weeks to really figure out that she was BSing me. So, I mean, that was really kind of going on for about a month.
Okay, so how long would you say that you were just sort of, I mean, in your life with this alien, what you thought was alien abduction, what you thought was specifically this range of alien abduction, I mean, how much of your life were you paranoid about this? Weeks, months, years? I'm
trying to think. I started hypnosis with Dr. Jacobs in, like, basically early 2007. I would say about 6-7 months.
Okay, so that's not so bad.
No, I caught on pretty quick. I mean, and considering how into it and how intense I was with it, it wasn't. I mean, I could have been way worse.
Right. And when did you hear about Emma Woods? How did your relationship form?
Well, when I realized, just because I had heard stories from Dr. Jacobs and from Elizabeth, just about this woman that was calling Elizabeth a liar and was just getting on his case and was flipping out. And as soon as I found out, as soon as I caught Elizabeth in the lie, and as soon as I figured out that everything that Dr. Jacobs was basing his current beliefs on, about him being scared and all that was, when I realized all of that wasn't true, it was because of the manipulation by Elizabeth, I was like, I got to talk to this woman. And because she was the only other person in the world that would understand what I had just gone through. And so, I guess they were always they were sending my mom links to her website and stuff, and so they didn't want me getting in contact with her because they knew
links to Emma's website.
Yeah, they were constantly reading her website and flipping out. She changed 2 words, and so I had gotten my mother had left the computer on. I had gone over and written down Emma's email address, and then I contacted Emma that way.
Okay, and well, I guess we should go back because we just sort of skipped over what was Jacob's reaction. You said nothing, but I mean, how does he just ignore this, or did he just get rid of you at that point?
I don't know exactly what words were said, but basically he didn't believe me. He didn't even give. I mean, I'd written a long email with all of my evidence showing that it wasn't that she was lying to him, and I sent it to him, and I guarantee he didn't read any of it, or at least not at that point. And he had sent me a very general email back. I don't want to say exactly what he said because I don't remember. And then after that, he seemed not interested in hearing it.
This is after he told you about Emma Woods?
Yeah, I knew about Emma Woods right away. I knew about her right when I first got involved.
Okay, so he's got Emma Woods telling him that Elizabeth is shady and all of this, and his reaction is that she's crazy. And now you come along and you say, no, actually, here's the evidence.
Right.
And his reaction is to just brush that off. I mean, does he start then calling you crazy, or How does
No,
he
didn't.
you?
He didn't really say anything about me. I mean, I'll give him that. He didn't really say anything about me, but he just didn't seem to really care. He wouldn't respond to my emails, kind of thing. And I sent him a last one, just saying, "Look," and I just try to reiterate everything to him. And then that's eventually when it came down to taking a polygraph test,
which Elizabeth took.
You're right.
Okay, and she passed that, right?
Yeah, I was all ready to rub it in his face, and then I was pretty surprised when I came back, and that pretty much solidified what he believed, because after that he wasn't hearing anything.
So do you know who administered that test, under what conditions, what questions were asked, any of that?
I had the information on my computer. I don't remember exactly. I mean, I know there were some things I didn't quite like about the questioning, because you have to remember, we're talking about fake people. I mean, we're talking about hybrids that aren't really quite human, but they couldn't really put that in the questions. And it also used it also said Brian, but I was also actually posing as a person named Mark. You know what I mean? So it's like kind of a weird area where I don't really know if it was done the best way or not. But I mean, regardless, it doesn't take a test to change my mind. You know what I mean? I've seen the evidence, and it doesn't matter what the test says. I know that, in fact, she was just making it all up.
Well, if I can interject something here about polygraph exams, there was not too awfully long ago on the Showtime network a little thing called Bullshit with Penn and Teller, and one of the last episodes I saw with that was the polygraph, and just how fallible and just how worthless that they are. And I was actually pretty shocked, because I always thought those to be a pretty good gauge of telling who's being deceptive and who was not. But they went through the entire battery of things that how you can fake a polygraph. And believe it or not, some of it actually involved the sphincter muscle. That's right.
Oh, really?
Yes,
I said
I've heard
that.
this, yeah.
And essentially it's raising and lowering your blood pressure, and you can do that any number of ways. But people have known how to get by polygraphs for years, which is why Penn and Teller essentially did this special on the polygraph, saying essentially it's bullshit. It's not worth anything. So I don't know that I would take her passing a polygraph as any sort of verification of anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are mountains of websites where you can find out what you can do, but at the same time, like to me, I was there. I saw the evidence, and it doesn't, like I said, you could pass a million polygraph tests.
Yeah, it wouldn't matter to you.
Mind.
Right.
Yeah, not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
So what about your mom in this? Now, she's friends with Elizabeth. She's friends with Dr. Jacobs. Does this put a strain on your relationship with her relationship with them? What happens there?
Oh, she didn't want me doing this interview at all, just because she is friends with them. And she kind of just tries to stay out of it, really, which is the smartest thing to do. Yeah,
why did you decide to come forward?
I'm not even quite sure. I guess just because I wanted there aren't very many platforms where I can express my frustration with what happened, and to me, this is one of the few platforms where I should just get out and just tell my story. I didn't really have any. I don't have any agenda or anything like that. I just wanted to tell the truth. I just wanted to say this is what happened.
Right. So where did it go from there? Was there anything, or did it end? Did you just present your evidence to Jacobs? He said nothing about it, and then what? You quit him?
Yeah, I just let it go. I mean, what else could I do? You know what I mean? I didn't want to be a pain in his ass or anything like that. If he had the evidence there, and he could have done with it what he wanted to do with it, and if he decided not to really think about it and look into it, that's his issue, and that's totally cool by me. It doesn't affect my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I said my piece. I did what I had to do, and I got out.
So, okay. So in terms of your hypnosis sessions, when you were sort of talking about Emma with David, or even in talking to Elizabeth, was that sort of stuff going on prior to your hypnosis sessions? Did the information you learned about these people inform your hypnosis sessions, do you think?
I talked to Elizabeth on a pretty regular basis, and you have to remember that I'd grown up with my mother and even my father to a degree who were already really engulfed in the subject. So I knew a lot about it. You know, I'd already been, as a child, I'd already been on a TV show. My mother had been on several TV shows. So I had quite a range of knowledge. And like I said, I talked to Elizabeth pretty frequently, and she would tell me all about her things that she saw, and sometimes she'd tell me about some of the things that Emma saw and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I had a pretty wide knowledge of it before I even went into it, so I really wouldn't, now that I look back on it, I knew way too much to go into hypnosis because I'm sure there was confabulation left and right, really. I mean, because like I think about some of the stuff I said, and then I think about some stuff I already knew, and some of it kind of corresponds with that. Was
Dr. Jacobs concerned about that type of cross-pollination?
He was, but when we went into the sessions, he at one point said that he believes that my information was trustworthy. But beforehand, he did have some concern. He was concerned to a degree that I might know too much. But after we started the sessions and he saw how I did, he thought I was okay.
And have you talked to any other experiencers in this particular loop? I mean, other abductees that have gone to see Jacobs? Do you know them? Are you friends with them?
Not so much. The only ones I know I know other abductees, but as far as working with Jacobs, I just Emma, Elizabeth, my mom, my father.
Okay. So what's your takeaway on hypnosis? Because I know that you haven't listened to our show and maybe haven't even, looked at sort of studies on hypnosis, but just having gone through this, would you recommend hypnosis regardless of this or no?
It's hard for me to say because I honestly had no idea how much of what I saw and what I said was actually real. You know what I mean? And for me, I guess it's a little bit harder because, like I said, I already knew a lot of information. But I have performed hypnosis on people, and I've seen some interesting results. Like for instance, when I had approached hypnosis with some of the people that I worked with, I had gone about it in a different way. I talked to people about some strange things that they had seen and experienced, but I would never let them know what I was actually looking for. So I wouldn't say, oh, well, that might be aliens or anything like that. I would just kind of say, okay, well, look, I have a way where we can possibly look at this. Let me know if you'd be interested in doing that. I usually give them about a week or two to respond and think about it. And I would go about the hypnosis session, and I would, go step by step and not really lead them anywhere, just kind of follow where they led me. And there were certain things that people said that lined up with some of the stuff that I've heard in other hypnosis sessions about UFO abductions. And so that was pretty intriguing to me. I don't know exactly what it means. The whole thing's kind of really just beyond me. But I think there's something to be said about that. But I don't know. I mean, there are a number of things that the phenomenon could be rather than just like a physical memory of something. I don't know how the human mind works in that way, but there is something to be said about the confirmation people have shown, and I think I learned the most about that when I had done the hypnosis myself on people, when I saw the things that they said kind of lined up with some things other people said, but they had no idea what we were actually looking for.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just troubling to me because you are so young and you were even so much younger when you were doing this. I mean, I can't think of any science that's like, come on in, anybody, and just, meddle with people's minds. Like, even if it was just fine, even if you didn't do anything wrong, it just...
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, now that I'm older, now that I know more about it, I wouldn't do it. It's just that I just didn't realize the potential harm that it could cause at the time. I thought, as far as I was concerned, I just thought that you were just looking at memories and that, you could go into it, and if things start getting bad, you can snap right back out of it and everything's fine.
Right.
So I was a bit naive, and it was kind of irresponsible of me, but I can't take it back now.
So where are you now with your experiences? Are you still having them?
No, not really. Not really at all. I mean, I'll have weird dreams and that kind of stuff, but they're just weird dreams, And it was way more intense when I was actually thinking about it all the time and that kind of stuff, and I would notice things more. But I haven't had anything at all. Not really a single instance. I had talked to him about this the other day. I just don't see anything.
Mm-hmm. Jeff.
Oh, I don't even know where to go.
Pretty crazy stuff, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's you know, in all the time that we've been talking about all of this, I mean, what you did as far as hypnotizing people, and like you said, not being trained, being kind of naive about it. I mean, I saw this firsthand myself. I had a discussion group that I belonged to, and both online and offline. And I remember meeting some people from the online group, and you know, going to a convention together or some kind of UFO expo, and two of the women going upstairs to do regression on each other. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You're not a hypnotherapist. You don't know anything about, well, I've been hypnotized, so I know what to do and I know the words to say, and that's enough. And so, you know, I started seeing exactly like what you described, which is this narrative gets started, and then before you know it, your head's completely underwater and you don't know from air. At that point, you're losing all critical thought when you're in that situation because you are so into it.
Right. You get rid of the conscious mind, which does a lot of that critiquing.
Yeah. I mean, the whole critical process of saying, now, what is this really? I mean, there's no stepping back from it at that point. And what I'm curious about is when you're in the throes of that obsessive nature, in discussing this stuff with Elizabeth, whether it be online or offline, there had to have been something that made you step backwards. Was it just her story was so involved and so X-File-ish, which I'm guessing is probably what it was more or less like, that you said, wait a minute, you know, something's not right. What was the spark in your head that said, I got to step back for a second because something's not lining up?
It was always in the back of my head. It was always there, even a little bit.
So you always, So you always had that thought.
Right. And I just kind of ran with it. I mean, that's why I had wanted her to do the webcam so bad, because I wanted that confirmation, because I wanted to believe that it was real. I mean, because it would have god awful waste of time if it wasn't, you know?
Right.
And
yeah.
You know what I mean? And it wasn't a waste of time. But, I mean, I wanted to believe it was real, because if it was, then what I was doing was extraordinary. If it wasn't, I was just a fool. And so I guess part of it was that not so much that I trusted her, but I guess part of it, too, is that I wanted it to be real. And I hated to think about the fact that a friend would pull something like that on me.
What was there also I don't know, what I've heard from a lot of people that I've sort of reconnected with over the past 6 months has been that, and they too came to the same kind of realization as you did, you know, when it came to going up in the motel room and let's do a regression session. You know, they said, well, sooner or later you get bored with that. You kind of grow up and out of it. And I said, well, when you say grow up and grow out of it, that kind of says to me that you viewed it as a game. I mean, to you, this was just trying to get inside your head a little bit. This was kind of exciting, I would assume, for you.
Absolutely. You know, I enjoyed doing it, and it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, how much of this stuff would you say was engrossing your life? In like 100% to 0%, where would you fall?
It would go up and down. I know there were certain weeks where I would not just do the regressions, but I would talk to her for hours.
Right.
For hours. And so I don't know, percentage wise, I mean, there's as far as my hobbies and interests went, you know, it was up there in the 60 percentile.
Right.
I mean, I had a lot of other things going at the time too, but I mean, I was constantly thinking about it, and I was, you know, I mean, we were doing a session almost every night for a little bit there.
Okay. Would you say that, and this is again a completely tangent issue, but when you were in that frame of mind and you were talking to her about this stuff for hours, and you were doing the IM things, and you had your head so underwater with this thing, and let's put aside, as we know, the hypnosis area of recall. I'm talking about direct recall, or direct experiences that you can remember just like that. Did those things seem to escalate to you? Did they stay the same? Did they not happen at all? Where would you say that when you were in the throes of all this and you were as deep in as you could get, were you noticing more activity, legitimate activity for yourself?
And that's a hard question to answer in that it's hard to say whether I was witnessing more activity or whether I was just more aware of stuff going on. But see, this is one of the things that I absolutely disagreed with Dr. Jacobs on, and that is that he said to me one time, and it really bugged me, and that was that whenever you deal with certain strange things in life, you have to first filter it through the abduction phenomenon before you filter it through anything else. To me, that just takes away just coincidence or just strange, just something happening just because that's the way nature is, as opposed to, you know what I mean? You can't do that. And I think that's the kind of thinking that the kind of, just made him paranoid and worried and stuff.
We've talked a lot on this show about the loss of critical thought the longer that you stay in this. I mean, you obviously experienced this.
Right.
Would you say, in your opinion, that Dr. Jacobs completely lost his critical thought?
Ooh, that's tricky because I mean my whole opinion about it is I don't think that Dr. Jacobs is a lunatic, and for most of my life that I've known him, he's been a pretty cool guy, and he's helped my family out a lot. And I gotta give him that. He's been cool, and I really think that he did pretty good stuff in his earlier work. But what I think his real problem is that he allowed himself to get a little bit too personally involved with his subjects. And I know he had good intentions in doing that, but at the same time, I mean, because he got so personally involved with Elizabeth, he developed a great amount of trust for her. And in developing that trust, he kind of just started believing everything she said. That's okay when you're dealing with honest people, but when you're dealing with somebody that is more into the fantasy than in the facts, then she kind of, he got so engulfed in it that he became paranoid and was believing everything she was saying. So I think in that particular instance, he did lose his concept of skepticism. I just don't think he was skeptical enough when it came to, at least to Elizabeth, because I've heard him be skeptical. I don't think he totally lost it, but when it came to her in particular, I think he did.
Okay. I mean, just for clarification's sake, we're not necessarily saying he went off the deep end or anything like that. I mean, right. I don't even necessarily think that. I think that, I mean, what you're saying, I mean, essentially the answer to the question I asked was yes. I mean, that he did. And see, that's where I have this, and I've seen this not only with yourself, but with a lot of people talking about this stuff over the years, is that, it's upon the researcher to take the lead role here and to be that voice of reason and to actually keep these things at arm's length. So, I mean, the ultimate problem there is becoming that involved with any of your subjects that you're researching their case, or any of the individuals, I should say. So, I mean, so the answer to the question actually is, yeah, he lost his critical judgment in a pretty quick way. I mean, we actually heard that in tapes that Emma's made public out there on the internet, that he was gravely concerned that people will think I've lost my critical sense. And, well, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but that's, I don't say that's not to be expected. That's to be expected with someone like yourself that, was not always aware of how this thing played out, was not always, was brought up around it, for lack of a better word. I mean, you were brought up in a household where this was known. Normal. This was not, normal as it can be. I mean, you were exposed to it at a pretty early age, and so therefore, I'm frankly surprised that he wanted to work with you at all, because being the son of someone he's already worked with, you got to know there's cultural contamination going on there to a large degree, and so that would be. I mean, if I were in those shoes, I'd say immediately, well, you're out, because there's no way I can trust anything I'm going to get from you. But it's always, to me, fascinating to hear the inner workings of this whole relationship and how these things work, because it is completely consistent with what I've seen in the past with this stuff, and it's personally why I feel like hypnosis is such a dangerous game to play with. I mean, do you walk away from this thing saying that? Not that hypnosis doesn't have its uses. I mean, believe me, quit smoking, great stuff. Retrieving memory, not so much. That's my stance on it. I mean, how do you walk away from this? Do you walk away from this saying, as far as retrieving memory, hypnosis is complete horseshit for a tool?
Well, it's hard to say because you have to remember that the only hypnosis I've ever been a part of had to do with alien abductions.
Right.
I've never really seen hypnosis dealt with in normal situations where I've been under hypnosis. I'm like, oh, that's what happened, and oh yeah, I remember that now that I did that. So it's hard for me to say because all the memories I was looking at had to do with aliens. So it's kind of, you know what I mean. I can't really make a judgment on that.
Right. I am curious now for these questions. How early did your experiences start, or how early in life did you see odd things that you can remember? That you remember outright?
I was really young. The earliest one I could possibly remember is being like probably 4 or 5, and just floating down a set of stairs. That was, I don't know why, but that's always stuck with me.
How weird have some of your conscious experiences been? As opposed to, I mean, let's define weird. Weird is being abducted by aliens, but there's a whole nother level of weird that I'm talking about. That I don't want to suggest anything to you, but I mean, just a very surreal experience that you feel doesn't always fit with something like flesh and blood aliens coming here from another planet to do medical experiments. It's been said on this show a number of times, and a lot of people have confirmed this for us, that to speak of the experience completely honest, in a completely honest and frank fashion, is really a big leap. And I don't know if you're going to want to take that leap here, but how bizarre have some of your experiences been that you can remember?
How bizarre? That's an interesting question. I mean, I've had one experience that's actually really kind of personal to me that happened about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. But that really had no indications of being UFO related at all. It felt more like a divine intervention kind of thing than anything. It wasn't even so much seeing things as it was just kind of feeling and just feel like, just something was a part of me, and I was just kind of taken over by something, and it was pretty intense. I don't tell that to too many people, but since it's anonymous, I guess I don't feel too weird.
Well, you're cool talking about it. You should hear some of the shit we talk about. Give you like for instance, I mean, just to kind of maybe give you something to think about. Like I had a guy approach me not horribly long ago and say he remembered a large rabbit coming to his window at night and seeing light, but it was this huge white rabbit that kind of hopped up to his door, and it was 5.5 feet tall. You would think, well, what the hell does that have to do with aliens, or what does that have to do with anything besides possibly a nightmare?
Right.
I mean, have you had anything that just to look at it you would go, nah, that's not this?
Nothing that extreme. No,
okay.
I can't say anything like that. That's just blatantly just out of whack.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, most of the stuff I've gone through, I can attribute to some sort of divine thing, or like a lot of the stuff was contributed to abduction stuff, which they can actually interchange. You know what I mean, a little bit.
Right. Huh. Well, I'm sure Jeremy's chomping at the bit to ask you about this thing that took you over.
Yeah, are we allowed to ask about that? Because I've had, similar perhaps things. I don't know, because I don't know what your situation was. But is that something that you're willing to talk about?
Yeah, but I was going to put a disclaimer on there and say, well, don't think I'm crazy, but I guess at this point, you've already made up your mind.
Off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too late.
Yeah, I know. Well, basically, I've always had I'm a very spiritual person, not so much in, just the Bible and religious text, but I have a really strong connection with the creative entity, as I like to call it. Just whatever your God may be, I call it the creative entity, just the force that created us and that keeps us going. And I have very eclectic views on religion, but anyway, I've always felt that force working through me since I was young, and I've had like a lot of prophetic dreams where I would dream something and it would come true. And I would when I was a child, I did so many crazy things. I said so many crazy things that actually ended up coming true. That at one point, I had said as a child, "Hey, I drew a picture and my grandma was dead in the picture." And because I had said so many things that people had seen come true when I was a child, and after I said it, that when I drew a picture of my dead grandmother, my aunt immediately went and flew up to a different state to go see her because she thought she was going to die. That's how intense it was. That's how much they took into what I had to say. And so I always felt like, I had a special kind of connection with this divine or creative entity. And so at one point I was with my fiance at the time, and her and I I had an idea. I want to take her out to look at the stars. I'm all romantic and stuff like that. And we went up to my old middle school and laid out a blanket under the stars. And basically we were just laying there, and there's a field across the way a little bit where there were cows, and we're laying down in the middle of the night looking at the stars and all that, and all of a sudden these cows just start freaking out and just start going and just making all this noise and just kind of going nuts. And so we got kind of freaked out ourselves. And so we were like, all right, we're going to get going. Something's not right here. Because it was weird. It was dead silence, and all of a sudden the cows are going nuts, and we just didn't feel comfortable. And so we were about to go, and I stand up, and all of a sudden I feel like something just kind of takes over my body. Like, the best way to explain it was all of a sudden I felt like something kind of came over me, and I felt like I was just kind of one with everything around me. I just kind of felt part of reality. It's kind of hard to explain, but like I could feel like my fingers interacting with the atoms in the air. That kind of, it's like a weird connection. But I just felt it was like the most wholesome, the most awesome feeling that I can't even describe in words that I've ever felt. And for some reason, I just started spitting out these words that just were not my words. I don't even remember saying them. My fiance was there, and she saw me doing this, and she was like, "What's going on?" She went over to kind of touch me, and then she felt some sort of force or something push her back down away from me. And I started talking about the current state of humanity and where we all kind of stood, and that we've kind of lost our way, and we've lost touch with the purpose of life and what we're supposed to get out of life. And then I had said something to the effect of, "If you have any questions, now is the time to ask." And so she asked me some questions, and the one that kind of stuck out to me after she told me about it, I don't remember all of this exactly, I remember some of it, but she said, "Well, what's the purpose of being alive?" And my answer was, for the soul to become aware of its own existence. And so after that, I was basically told, or I said out loud, that this was just the first of many encounters, and as time goes on, I'll become more aware of what my path is going to be. And so then I kind of got out of this trance, and her and I are looking up at the sky, and all of a sudden we see a green streak of light go across the sky, just really big, like almost as big like a softball would look if it was like a little bit ahead of you. And so her and I went back to her car, and we just sat in the car for about 2 hours without saying a word. And then finally one of us was like, "Did that just happen? Are you serious? Did that just happen?" And we were just in awe. We didn't move, we didn't do anything. We just sat there, just kind of soaking it all in. And that was that experience. I can't believe I said that on a podcast. But that happened.
Yeah, I feel better about my stuff.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said I feel better about my stuff. I'm not alone.
Oh, come on. No, come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, everything with the exception of speaking as another entity I can relate to. Like, I think getting into that other state and, feeling the oneness, feeling as though you're actually interacting with the atoms in the air. I mean, to me, that's the equivalent of Well, Jeff, when I've told you, like, the room becomes sort of other dimensional or something, you can't see your hand in front of your face, and you can sort of make patterns of color with your hand in the air, and that sort of weird
right.
thing.
It all kind of blends together.
Yeah. Huh.
Yep.
I wonder what that is.
I don't know, and I wasn't high or anything, I promise. I mean...
Well, hey, there's a question. What is your relationship to altered states? And believe me, on this show, we're not going to hold this against you. How many psychedelics have you tried in your lifetime?
Psychedelics, I think twice. I've done, hallucinogens.
Which ones?
I did acid once.
Okay.
And I did a synthetic called 2CI once.
Huh.
What's 2CI? I've never heard of that.
I don't, honestly, I took it when I was like 16, and I don't really remember much about it. I mean, it was very similar to an acid trip, but not quite so, crazy. It was just a little bit more calm, and, like you'd see things kind of, move together and that kind of stuff. It was like a calm acid trip.
Well, how would you compare when during an alleged abduction experience, when you feel the room change? How would you compare that to a hallucinogen and to that divinity experience in terms of feeling as if you're in another headspace? Would you say there's a similarity there, or would you say they're completely different?
What am I comparing, the abduction to the divine thing, or the hallucinogens to the divine thing?
To all three, just all three. I mean, do you see similarities between the three?
The divine one wasn't quite like that, in the sense that it was more of a feeling than anything. It's just kind of how you felt, whereas with the hallucinogens, it's more of what you saw. And I guess with the abduction stuff, I mean, I don't really have any clear-cut memories about the abduction things. As far as, I just remember, like, as far as consciously remembering things, I just remember snippets. But I don't know. I don't really think. I feel like all three don't really go together. Personally, I feel like they're three different things. I could be wrong, but as far as relating to how I felt at the time, I don't really feel any relation.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think that this abduction stuff is about now, if not hybrid, evil takeover of the Earth?
Well, see, the part where I get stuck, and this is where I really get stuck, is when you're talking about the fact that you can have a person from Texas and a person from, I don't know, China, and like I'm sure they're saying the same things, and that's what gets me, because if it wasn't for the confirmation things, I wouldn't believe it in a second. But then when it comes to the confirmation, it's like, because I think about just logically how, I mean, because we're talking about millions and millions of people getting abducted every night, according to what some researchers say. And I just don't understand why there aren't more instances of people coming home and wondering, where the hell's my wife? You know what I mean? Like, why that isn't happening more often, or like at all. Because the thing is, I mean, it doesn't matter how intelligent of a being you are, human behavior is just not predictable. And so you don't know when someone's going to come home early. You know what I mean? You don't know that stuff's going to happen. Why aren't there more instances of that? And that's kind of what bothered me. So, I mean, I'm kind of torn. It's like, well, why are these people seeing the same things? But at the same time, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't even consider it as a possibility. So I just don't know. That's just honest to God true. I just don't know.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I guess I have one more Elizabeth question, which is, wasn't she married? Or isn't she married?
When was she married? She was married. She is married. She has, I believe she has 3 children.
Right. So what does her husband make of this? Do you know? Have you spoken to him?
No, I've never spoken to him. I kind of think that she kind of keeps it distant from him. I mean, that's just what I've gathered. That, I mean, I'm sure she talks to him about it, but it's like, she'll just kind of give it to him at face value and not really go into the depths at which she goes into.
And do you know where these hybrids supposedly live? Could you just go to their house?
No, I mean, she had mentioned that she knew where some hybrids live, but I don't know. I don't know if I would really believe in hybrids, so I couldn't really tell you.
I know, but wouldn't it be fascinating to just go knock on that door?
Well, yeah, that's what I was telling her. I'm like, go knock on the door, surprise them and just see what they're like. You know what I mean? And she's too scared or whatever.
Fascinating. Now, I guess just one last question in terms of where Jacob sort of went off the rails. I thought privately when we were talking the other day that you suggested that maybe he just got too close to this phenomena, and people get too close to the phenomena sort of go off the rails. Did I misinterpret that, or do you think that that's a possibility?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was saying. Oh, well, I mean, I said it a different way. I mean, I said he was getting too close to his subjects, but that in itself put him too close to the phenomenon, because he got really close to Elizabeth, and in doing that, she kind of brought him into the fantasy she was creating. And since he was so into the phenomenon, he didn't really think twice about what she was saying and took it all as fact. And by taking it all as fact, he then believed that he was being chased by aliens, which if you really were being chased by aliens would be freaking scary, so I can understand why I'd be scared. But I just think he got too involved with the subjects, because all the stuff with Emma, all the stuff with Elizabeth, even the stuff with me, all this would have never happened if he would just kept it to research. He'd make his friends somewhere at the bar, not through UFO abductions, you know what I mean?
Right.
If he was stuck to that, none of this would have happened.
And what about you? Where do you go from here? Are you done even thinking about this stuff? Do you just go on with life?
Oh, I love this kind of stuff. I mean, I love the discussions about it, and like I said, I feel like I'm pretty in touch with I can really feel that there's so many things going on in this world that we can't see, and that maybe other dimensional or something. But my focus has been more spiritually than anything. So I guess my thinking has gone more towards the metaphysics and about religions and God and what I call the creative entity and all that kind of stuff. That's where my focus has been mostly. But I love talking about the paranormal and that kind of stuff because it kind of goes hand in hand sometimes.
Yes. You should listen to our show. I think you would enjoy it.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you have any more questions?
I'm curious if Brian, if you've ever had, let's put all the alien stuff aside. Have you ever experienced any ghost phenomena? Or, I mean, obviously your family at least thought that you had some extrasensory stuff going on, but any ghost type stuff or poltergeist activity around you at any point in your life?
No, I mean, nothing like that. I mean, you could take some of the stuff that I saw as far as when I was young and I saw beings walk through the walls. You could take that and twist it into ghosts. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you could take any of those experiences and, once someone implies that it's something, you kind of take it as that.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
I mean, I've never had an experience where I thought I saw a dead relative or anything like that. No, I've never experienced anything like that.
Okay. Huh. Okay. All right. Very good.
Brian Reed, if that is your real name. Thank you very much for coming on the show and for, braving these waters and going public with things that probably are painful or embarrassing. We really do appreciate it.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was a good time. And I'll be listening to your show, I guess, because it sounds pretty cool.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, that's
awesome.
actually, Brian, that's how we get listeners. We just put people on the air and then...
Right.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I definitely want to be in touch with you. And plus, there's some other things I wouldn't mind talking to you guys about off the air.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for everything, and I'll be in touch.
Hi, this is David Roundtree, author of Paranormal Technology, and you're listening to Paratopia.
So the Jeff.
So the Jer.
Wowie, wow, wow, as Christopher Walken might say.
Yeah, there it is.
So here ends the journey, yeah. I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't really know how much more anyone needs at this point to kind of get a good feel for things. And I think at this point, the Lilienfeld episode and the episodes that have dealt with this subject in particular from here on forward, I don't know how much more anyone needs to hear. I think if everyone honestly and earnestly sits down and listens to these shows that we've done since Dr. Lilienfeld, I think it's pretty clear that no one should be using this tool within this field. And I think we are still going to do an additional show, but this will be with a noted hypnotist, right? That wants to come on.
I want to cover more than this with him.
Things.
I mean, he also talks about binaural beats and stuff. I mean, I'd really like to get to the bottom of what hypnosis is, if he knows what binaural beats are doing in the brain. I mean, if he knows the answer to these things, I think those sort of, mechanics will be fun to play with.
It'll be a bigger show than just about this stuff. I mean, it'll be about the mind's interaction with that. So
getting back to this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
So Emma Woods is completely vindicated in terms of the lone crazy woman.
Yeah. I would say so. Yeah.
That is done. That is put to bed. I think you have to be crazy at this point not to call into question all of what Jacobs has done. I mean, I don't see where because we have his public statement. It's not as though, I mean, he's been on a radio show. He put a public statement on his website, and we know what his interaction was with Bill Burns over the UFO Magazine article. And so you put that all together, and it ain't looking good. I mean, I don't see what he could even do to resuscitate his career except just wait because it's ufology and everyone will forget in about a year.
Yeah, ufology has a notoriously short-term memory problem, in that way. But no, I got to be honest. I think the only I think I agree with Brian when he said that that the first book that David wrote was a good book, and I did read that book. This is the very first book that he did, the UFO.
But it was a UFO book. It wasn't a.
It was a UFO book. Yes, correct. It was not an abduction book. And to be honest with you, I've, as far as the abduction work goes, what do I say there? I pretty much said since the first time I saw it on sightings being done, like this can't be right. And I think actually
but you've been ahead of the curve, so you don't count. I mean, for everyone out there who's not ahead of the curve, this is big news. I guess that's what I'm getting at. I think that you're just like blasé about it because you've seen this coming for the last 10, 20 years. And for the rest of us schmucks, this is like a slap in the face. I mean, even knowing about the instant message, Emma talks about the instant message hypnosis sessions. Right. And I didn't include that in my article because I just thought it was so outrageous that no one's going to who's going to even believe that happened?
Credibility of the story, yeah.
Yeah, even in this story, it strains the credibility of the story. But to hear it out loud from Brian, I mean, my jaw dropped, even though I already knew it. It's just like to hear it out loud is different than to read it or to have someone explain it to you, But he actually did this, and he actually was a part of this, and I think it just smacked me in the face hearing that, even though I already knew it.
Well, and I think that part of the reason is because he's an articulate guy. He doesn't sound like a moron. He doesn't sound like, he doesn't sound like an idiot. And so to hear somebody say that who sounds like they're more or less feet on the ground just doesn't seem to make much logical sense to hear someone talk about doing this sort of thing over instant messages. I mean, it's just like, really? What else can you do over instant messages?
Well,
can you do magic?
It makes sense in a certain way. Mean? I mean, it makes sense in terms of, family friend, trusts Jacobs, trusts Elizabeth. Right. If Jacobs is saying it's working, then, but even so, even under this, right? Even under Jacobs is my friend, Jacobs is the foremost authority, and so all I have to do is look at what he's doing and replicate that. Even that is, you can understand it from the point of view of those relationship dynamics. Still can't understand it in terms of what other huge profession can you turn to where you can just say, well, I'll just look at the surgeon doing surgery and then I'll go do surgery. I'll just look at the construction worker put together, plans for a building and then I'll go put together plans for a building. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into hypnosis than just look at this watch, and listen to my voice.
Listen to the sound of my voice.
And here again comes the problem with all of this, which is that David Jacobs, the foremost expert in all of this, according to himself, is not qualified to be doing hypnotherapy because he lacks the therapy part of that. He's not trained as a therapist. He doesn't know about any of the, psychological dynamics that go on. He's not trained to deal with them. Clearly, he got overly invested in his own subject here. So, he's not the one to be teaching anyone anything. He's not the one you're supposed to be looking at his notes. Even if we did live in a world where we're okay to look at someone's notes and then go, I can do that. But we're not even living in that world. So it's like you put those are just two huge strikes, and it's like it just smacks of that's what this field is. It's a whole bunch of people looking at each other's notes going, oh, I can do that. And forgetting that this is an actual profession that takes actual education in other fields and isn't something that you can just do on a whim. And that's why this has to be abolished, beyond the fact that it's the incorrect tool for the job.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think that's exactly it, is that so many people have seen this done over the course of time that, just like you say, they watch a session, a video where someone performs this, or they read an IM transcript, if one so desires to try and attempt this over the internet, which is absurd. If when one so desires to do this, one can read the transcripts and pull out the questions and feed them to the subject through instant messages. So, yes, you can do that. The question is, should you do that? The answer is no. I'm getting a lot of mic play tonight.
Yes, this is like super password. I'm liking this. The answer is incorrect tool. It's just my dad is an auto mechanic, and he's been an auto mechanic for 45 years. And I have watched him replace engines. I have watched him pull transmissions. I have watched him do the simple act of checking the radiator level, how much antifreeze is actually in the radiator. And let me tell you something, folks. Just because a radiator cap is cool does not mean it will not spew like a shaken up Pepsi in your face when you take the cap off. Okay? This is a fact because I experienced this not more than a month ago. I wasn't burned. It was cold. The water was, but this is what I'm saying. There are small subtleties. There are finer points of education in knowing what to ask, how to ask it, the tone of your voice. Everything plays into this. And so it's unfortunate to me to think that people in this field, and I'm not just going to point the finger at Dr. Jacobs. I'm going to say everybody in this field who's been using this and doing this, and then therefore actually teaching others how to do this. I think that's the bigger problem here. I'm always looking or trying to see the bigger problem is that this tool not only isn't the right tool, but it's also been used in such a blasé way that it gives that appearance of, well, I can do this. Because you're not going to watch brain, surgery and go, well, that looks easy. Well, the hell it does. It doesn't look easy at all. This has the appearance of ease of use. It appears to be the magic key to unlock memory. And it very clearly is not that. Yes. I agree because you just said everything that I said.
Yeah.
Meow.
Well, because what else is there? There's nothing more to say. I mean, that's really it.
Well, do we want to get into...
You had an issue of what the importance was of him admitting, that he had done the instant messages on her 50 times or something.
Unless I got this wrong, he had done instant message hypnosis with her, but he said that he had done hypnosis with 50 different people.
Okay,
that he was a researcher. He fancies himself a researcher at some point.
Right.
At some point at the age of 21 or 22.
You find that to be
offensive.
Well, of course, but you find that to be surprising. I mean, do you find that it?
Yes, I mean, it's surprising.
Astounding?
Surprising. It falls into the category of I know it's there, but I haven't really heard it. I've just heard about it.
Okay.
Much like the instant message hypnosis, and then once I hear it, it's like, oh my god, that's really real. There really are people doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all real.
Well, I think again, it's one thing for you and I to sit here and pontificate on everything. It's another thing to bring on guests who are like, yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that's a big deal. I think people need to hear it from the actual people doing it, not just us saying that people are doing it.
I suppose. I mean, the only thing I can say is like I think I might have said even during the show is that, going to a conference one time with a couple of experienced friends, they went up to their room and did this on each other. And I couldn't stay in the room because I felt like someone was doing drugs in the room. That's what it felt like. Like, I can't be here. I've got to get out of here. And mostly because of the two people, I held them in a certain amount of weight, to what they told me they had experienced. And, and later I find out that a good chunk of what they recalled was in doing this to each other. And I thought, well, this is not right because they're not doctors. They're not trained to do this. Mm-hmm. And that was really what set me off to go, okay, I've got to try to help my friends break out of this. And so that was my actual drive for going, something's wrong here. And this is not what people should be doing. And that's more or less what kind of put the fire under my ass to go out and ask people, namely psychologists and hypnotherapists, is this normal? Is this that easy? Is it, and I've talked about what the reply was. So I didn't find that surprising, unfortunately.
I will say, yeah.
And I don't see the importance of it. I mean, it's obvious that people have been doing this for a while. It's been the thing to do. And in their defense, and one might say there is no defense, but there is, because, in essence, it's ignorance, and it's not intentional ignorance, and it's not, they earnestly believe that this was the way to do it. And so, I mean, at that point, they feel like they're just following the field guide. They're following the railroad tracks that have been laid down for them before.
But that's the problem with all of this. Like, it's that. Well,
yeah, I agree.
It's the amateur.
But one can't. Yeah,
it's this. It's
I understand what you're saying.
No, I mean, MUFON. You fill out a form and they send you a decoder ring, and you're a MUFON investigator. If you're working with David Jacobs, you just get the transcripts to the instant message chats, and then you can do instant message hypnotherapy. I mean, it's like it's all so stupid, and and the way it works, and I just think it's like. I mean, when do we wake up from that, Why is it just two guys bitching about it on a radio show? Why is this is the field. It's not like this is an anomaly within the field. This is how the field works. And so every time you hear one of these, bloggers in the blogosphere blog away about how they don't want rules and they don't want, when Richard Dolan says, well, who's qualified to peer review my work? It's like every time I hear something like that, I'm going to think back to this show, and I'm going to think, I don't know, but that's what differentiates a real field of study from a rinky-dink piece of shit full of con artists and crazy people. I mean, That's the difference, is the ability to peer review, to have some sort of, ethic, some sort of standards of evidence, some sort of, that's science, right? Some sort of measurement that we can all agree to.
Well, yeah, but that's the problem, is the agreeing to. That's the problem. That's where everyone's barometer
it's a problem.
Gets fucked up.
Here's the thing. It's a problem because the people who would have to agree at this point are all circus clowns, it seems, or mostly circus clowns, and then a couple of good people. So, are the circus clowns that's the problem. It's like, It is like the more you start to think about it, like the worse it seems. And then the more you think about that, you realize, well, wait a minute, that's what the field is. So these bloggers are defending how the field is, which is what brought them to the table in the first place. That's the only reason they would even be heard in the first place, is because it's amateur. It's amateur night. So we're arguing against amateur night, but amateur night is in denial that it's amateur night. It thinks it's an expertise, right? This amateur night that we live in believes itself to be an expertise. And the moment that you say, no, you're not, you're amateur night, it gets offended. And then you see stuff like this, and, what do the amateurs do with it? They go, oh my God, that's completely awful. What a shock. It's like, no, this is what you are. This is what you brought into existence. The moment you decided professionals need not apply. Fuck you, ufology.
Okay. Wow. Vaeni on the warpath tonight.
Well, I can almost hear Jacques Vallée in the back of my head going, no, the problem is that the professionals don't want to deal with this in the first place, so what choice do you have? Except that I know from Jeff Ritzmann that this field used to be full of solid amateurs and professionals.
Yeah.
It just somehow, somewhere along the way, just has degraded into a circus, like a complete circus. It used to always have circus elements. There was always the contactee movement. There was always the Gray Barkers and the Jim Mosleys out there. But now it's all that. So what do we do here?
There is nothing you can do for the people that won't listen to reason. And if you'll remember, I got into quite a knockdown drag out about this very thing, which is that there are rules of evidence, and what doesn't pass through the filter has to be chucked. And if we don't have some sort of rule of evidence, then that's a problem. This doesn't dissuade me from listening to testimony. It doesn't dissuade me from even single person testimony, as Keith Chester pointed out last week. Do we negate single eyewitness testimony? Absolutely not. But I think that we really have to ask the hard questions of those people and solidify their account in every way that we can. And if it's one of those things where you walk away from this and you go, I have a feeling this guy's not being truthful, then I think that has to carry as equal weight as whatever they're telling you. Where do you go from here? The answer is that the field is not going to turn around overnight. I think that what good work is being done needs to percolate further than what it normally does. And so I think that is the function of this program, which is to highlight, at least in our measure, what is the critical good work that's being done, is to highlight that work and try and present it to a bigger audience. I don't know what else one can do. I mean, we've talked before about this, that the field is not going to change, and I don't think any amount of expose or even education at this point is going to make people understand, because there are too many people who are too invested, either financially or as far as a ufological career-wise, or a book or a magazine. Too many people, or emotionally, correct, are too invested. And so how do you break that? You can't break that, because as we went over with Dr. Lilienfeld, the people who were regressed and remember this terrible thing that happened to them, that's a real memory to them. And that's what's really scary to me, is that how many experiencers are man-made. So what do you do with that? And the only thing I think that we can do, you and I, and this program, the only thing we can do is to, on our own, is to discard what doesn't pass through our filter, and let our members know that, I'm not saying something in the sense of, well, you can trust us that we're not going to, go off into la la land. But I think that at this point in the show, listeners know that we don't take any of this at face value. We just certainly don't take any of it for granted, and that we're going to do our best to kind of present to them what we think is something that they can sink their teeth into and really maybe take somewhere.
Should we come up with a list of who we think are the top investigators and the top thinkers in the field, and just come up with a list and just say what their specialties are, and just have that there for people to be able to reference? I
don't think it would be a bad idea. I mean, of course, and again, I'm sure people are going, yeah, this is all really great, but what if I don't agree with your mindset, or what if I don't agree? This is not about.
Then you don't read the list.
Well, no. See, that's where everybody misses the point. It's about their methodology. It's not about what possible conclusions they may be reaching. It's because that we put into a speculative area, but. What are they doing when they investigate a case? How are they proceeding? What is the review of that case? That's kind of what you have to measure this by. It's not measured by their personal view, because everyone's got a personal view. I got one. You got one. Our listeners all have their own. That's where there needs to be this line of demarcation where we say, this is what I think based on what I'm looking at. But there could be a million different possibilities. I don't like the ETH. But that doesn't mean it's not a valid theory. It certainly is. And it's probably up there on the top upper echelon of possible answers for this, what this is. I don't personally feel that way. I mean, I'd put it number 5. I'd put it somewhere in there. But not everybody agrees with that. But that doesn't mean, I think everyone else is out to la la land. I think there are solid researchers out there who, for one reason or another, just take the human approach and go, this is kind of what I think it is. We need to stop associating that with what is the quality or caliber of the work that's being done.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. About Brian Reed, one last time, I find it interesting that he has these now spiritual experiences, or sort of almost channeling or something type experiences, and he doesn't associate them with the UFO phenomenon. I find that fascinating, because every now and then you run into this, and you could even argue that I'm the same way, right? I've got my spiritual thing, and then I've got this UFO thing, and ne'er the twain shall meet, although they do meet on a couple of occasions. But what is it about a person who is, an experiencer of one highly strange set of activity that then transforms into the other, and then they don't think that how many people in the world would this happen to? Why would you not immediately think, oh yeah, this is all part of the same tapestry here?
I don't understand the question. Why would you not think that it's the same?
Yeah, if you're Brian Reed, why would you think that, oh yeah, I ghost-like aliens walked through my wall one day, and I'm channeling something else another day, and we see this green object streak across the sky and blah, blah, blah. I mean, why would you think that those two things are not related in your life? How many people would one of those happen to, let alone two?
Well, if you're unbeknownst to the paranormal in general, I think that's the easy thing to kind of, put aside. That's one of the first things that I've largely told people that I've met who think that something's going on with them as far as this phenomenon, as far as the UFO alien / thing is going. I'll say, okay, well, here's an exercise. Sit down tonight with a pad and a paper, and I want you to write down, no matter how bizarre, no matter how strange or seemingly off the subject this is, and I want you to write down a list of every odd thing that you can ever remember occurring to you. Seen, experienced, heard, felt, whatever. And you find that, there are a lot of crossovers in all of this. And not all of it relating to UFOs. Some related to just insanely ridiculous synchronicities, all the way up to poltergeist phenomena, all the way up to even cryptid type stuff. So I don't think that people often draw the line, because I know way back, I didn't draw that as a conclusion thing. I just thought that these things are out there and they can be experienced. And so I didn't make the line of saying there's something about me seeing this. There's, this is something that's within my life and that I am perceiving because of whatever reason. I just thought this is a phenomenon. This happens, and people on TV see these kinds of things, and I've read books about people seeing these kinds of things. So I don't know that I wouldn't immediately. I can't fault someone for not immediately drawing that line. Now, Brian has been in this. He has gone that distance, and he's had this spiritual experience that he told us about that was very strange. that experience in particular, I don't know how you couldn't equate to this. You've got a light in the sky, first of all, that is behaving strangely. You've got this, like you said, some sort of possessive manifestation of something. It seems very connected to this sort of thing. I can understand why he would be very apprehensive about talking about that, because it does sound strange and it does sound far out, but you and I know that this is part of how this thing reacts.
Yeah, if he knew more about me, I think he'd be just fine saying that out loud.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, which I like, do you know who you're talking to? Do you know who we are? But I think it's easy for people not to make the hardcore connection and say, you know, it's more than what I'm thinking it is, because I think I think there's a lot of confusion when you first think about that. Like, I remember when Lee said to me, we were on the couch at the condo, and he said, okay, so first on the list, how many UFOs have you seen in your lifetime? And at that point, it was 6 or 5. He said, now, do you understand that most people go their whole lives and don't see one? I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Oh. It was that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, well, and like I said, just to say, I mean, I'm not picking on Brian. Like I said, I was the same way. I had both of these things happening, and I said, no, these aren't related, because I read some Krishnamurti books, and that was what triggered this spiritual thing. So I know that was the trigger point for this spiritual thing, or this Kundalini energy or whatever, but I also know that I've had 2 experiences that tie it in with this UFO phenomena. So I don't think one created the other, but I can't... I mean, you know, just to step back out of myself, if I were listening to me, I'd say the same thing I'm saying to Brian, which is, how on earth can you not make the association? What are the odds that you have 2 crazy things going on and they're not related?
Right. Well, I can see where you're coming from in his life now. I don't see how he can't make the connection there, but... Well,
he's still young, too. I mean, I get the sense he hasn't really thought everything through yet, and it's still unfolding in his life, so, you know.
Well, absolutely, and that's the thing. I mean, I think that's something that you know is a point that everybody kind of comes to and understands. Wow, this isn't all about this phenomena just showing up, where these strange things just happening, and I happen to be, you know, coincidentally in the place where these are going on. Sooner or later, you realize that it is something, you know, that is inextricably linked to you. That's probably one of the more uncomfortable things for somebody to have to admit about this, I think, is that these aren't just happenstances. These aren't just, it's not an accident for you to have this happen. This is not a one-off event. This is something that's going to probably follow you off and on throughout your life. So, you know, but at this point, you're right, it is still unfolding, but yet at the same time, maybe someone hasn't mentioned to him that this is not the normal paradigm for most people. Because maybe a lot of people just don't understand or can't get their head around that sort of concept that, you know, having all of this in your life is not normal. It's not everyone's experience.
Well, I don't think it helps that he spent most of his life listening to a man who doesn't believe in the spiritual growth or evolutionary growth of the person in terms of abduction, and sees it all as, you know, black and white evil hybrids taking over the earth kind of stuff. I mean, I guess... If I grew up believing that, then how could I make the association?
Well, and let's not forget, you know, that he grew up in a household where this was a subject. You know, I didn't grow up in a house where this was a subject, where it kind of, at least probably, let's be generous and say twice a week he may have heard this around the house from mom. It's no fault on mom, and it's not a dig on her at all. I mean, it's part of her life too. So, she needs to talk about it, and invariably the kids hear it. And so there's a certain amount of, I would say, just from my standpoint, I mean, there's a certain amount of contamination going on there, just growing up around that sort of thing. I don't feel that's particularly normal. And so does that have any bearing on how he views all of this stuff, you know, in that he recognizes that there's more. He recognizes that there is a bigger picture, and it may contain all of these different elements, like a stew, and maybe he just doesn't realize everything's in the same pot.
Now, here's the other big thing for me, anyway, in this, and not necessarily the Jacobs case, but just ufology in general. I'm reading, just finishing up, gosh, I don't remember the name of it, but UFOs in the Soviet Union, I think it is, the Jacques Vallée book. I mean, I've been just, on the appendix of this book forever. Huh. But, I mean, he mentions that paranormal activity, such as poltergeist phenomena, precedes a UFO sighting or comes after. That is the norm, not the exception to the rule. And that he and Hynek had known that way back when. Right. So my question is, if they knew that way back when, and they knew the connection to sort of, cryptozoological items and fairies and all that sort of stuff, and these are the two, most respected people, and when you think of, sort of the fathers of ufology, Hynek is certainly a name that comes to mind. Then how did that fall to the wayside? How did that become outlier data? Where did that go? That's not something that we're discovering. That's not something new. And that's not something that Jacques Vallée is just now saying, or was even just saying in the 90s. Right. They've known this since, what, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s? I mean, when did they know this? And then how did it become cast aside as the extreme point of view, which is actually the fact of the matter?
Well, the short answer to it is that everyone else in the field besides the two of them, much like has happened in the past 10 or 15 years, is that a certain group lays their aspirations on this field and says this is what it is, and makes the empty conclusions based on the desire of what they want it to be. And I think that's probably what happened here, is that a lot of the other researchers of the day probably read that and go, who's going to buy that? I mean, who is going to buy that? Whether it's true or not, who's going to buy that? It's already out the window as far as credibility goes. We're already dealing with something that is really subjective and is also really elusive. Now we're going to add this into the mix? I mean, this just further complicates everything. What does that mean for life after death? That's going to trot into that field as well. So, I think it's a matter of what everyone's what everyone is projecting onto it is the desired answer. Anything that doesn't pass that filter for them is chucked.
Well, let me throw another theory out there.
Okay.
That it's all based on commerce. All of it. I watched this documentary Shades of Grey, which is about Gray Barker. So Gray Barker made up the Men in Black stuff. He or promoted it, whoever made it up, but probably made it up, and promoted a whole bunch of crazy contactees and authors, people he made authors that he knew were crazy. I mean, he knew that they had spent time in mental hospitals and all this, but he liked their crazy stories and he liked promoting them. And the sense I got from the movie is that he believed in the trickster phenomenon, that he saw this all as part of a trickster thing. And so for him to hoax things was just him doing what part of the field always does, which is hoax, which wasn't to say that he didn't care about the field in some way, as some researchers like Stanton Friedman argued in this film. So let's take that all at face value. Let's say that's true. So basically what we're saying then is that way back at the beginning of this, you had people who understood the trickster aspect and who understood that all of this phenomena, this paranormal phenomena, was related in some way and that it wasn't aliens from outer space. And so they molded it. They took crazy people, they took contactees and crazy people and promoted them because those stories are so far out that they would sell. And they created this alien myth. And then when that didn't, when that stopped selling, Viv from Venus and all of that type stuff, then suddenly it's, the little gray, abductors who are little doctors and cold and whatever. But that, I guess what I'm saying is that perhaps it didn't change because the phenomena changed with the times, the way we've been thinking about it, but just that it stopped selling the other way, so they started selling a different bill of goods. And in this different bill of goods, you have little alien doctors. And now you've got not just carny barkers selling books and showing films at community gatherings. You've got the likes of Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs and John Mack and, Leo Sprinkle and Barbara Lamb and people who bill themselves as real researchers. Except that at least some of those people, if not all, we don't know because we haven't looked into all of their backgrounds, but I can at least attest to 2 of them, have taken people that are crazy. Or that, in the case of Jacobs, whatever Elizabeth is, I don't know that she's crazy, but certainly not credible. Let's say that. Let's say they've taken not credible people and pumped them for all they're worth to create these books. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just a different level. It's just that they present themselves as credible in a different way. And it's all commerce. It's all artists doing art. And it all gets back to the original thing. The reason how all this started is because they believed in the trickster aspect of this and believed that they were just a part of it. And it just evolved out of that. And it evolved to the point where they don't even recognize the trickster thing. They don't even know that they're doing that anymore. They actually think they're serious researchers doing serious research. But the pattern is the same. I mean, we're going to, I don't know how much we want to say here, but I mean, we're going to be seeing some more stuff coming out in the coming months about other people that ain't going to be pretty, whether it comes out in this show or in another form. I don't know, but I do know that a lot of this work is going to be called into question. And if you look at that Shades of Grey movie, it looks suspiciously like the same thing in different clothing. Promotion of crazy people to make a buck.
Well, in order for what you're proposing to have been the case, then that must mean that there's some sort of organization to that, or do you think that it's strictly a bandwagon type of thing?
No, I think it's a bandwagon type of thing. With Gray Barker, it's like Gray Barker had collaborators. So it wasn't just him, it was him and some collaborators. Jim Moseley was one, right? And they made fake UFO videos. And there was another guy on there, and I don't remember his name, but he stepped forward and said, yeah, I faked this, that, and the other thing with Gray. And here are the documents. Here's us writing back and forth. And Gray Barker just basically saying, wow, these people are really buying this bullshit,
Right.
So that's what it is. It's Carney Barker's originally going, wow, people are really buying this bullshit. Hot dog. And one of the things they mentioned about Gray is that he realized that this field was full of shit and that it attracted crazy people and artists and on down the line, which I find funny. Because we're always talking about the connection between artists, but we're always talking about it in a credible way, right?
Right.
But Bud Hopkins, of course, is what? He's an artist. So here you go, the sort of father of abduction research. Well, I guess you could say whatever Dr. Simon in some way, but really Bud took the ball and ran with it. But he's what? He's an artist.
Right.
And we assume because he's been telling us, just like people assumed Gray Barker was on the up and up, we assumed that Bud Hopkins, he'd always made the statement, I'm paraphrasing, but basically I've never been hoaxed. The reason that I'm still around is that no one's ever pulled the wool over my eyes. But I think we're going to be finding out soon enough that that's not true.
Right.
In a big way, like in a big credible way. And so, but he wasn't doing it consciously, I don't think. I don't think we're going to find letters from Bud Hopkins saying, wow, I really fucked these people. Ha ha ha. These people bought this. No, I think it's weird. It almost went from this conscious, malicious intent of the Gray Barker era into the unconscious, I don't want to hear anything outside of my own theory, so I'm not going to listen to any of the experts telling me that this person is crazy and that I'm being had, of a Bud Hopkins. Like, I think that's sort of, I don't know, there's just something in there that's fascinating to me, and maybe there's a paper in there to be written. I don't know.
Huh. Well, I don't know. I don't look at it from the standpoint that this field is being written. Although, when you talk about commerce, I certainly see that, and I've certainly talked about that before. That a lot of the drive in this is book sales and speaking engagements and all of that. I certainly agree with that. I certainly agree with that. That kind of thing is aggressively defended because that then turns into that person's income, or at least a portion of it. So I understand how some people would be offended or aggressively defend whatever their theory is that they're talking about. I has it mutated into something that is unrecognizable to what it used to be? For me, at least, it has, in the sense of what research is and what that means. But there are, a core of people out there who are doing solid stuff. And so is this a tug of war between people who are trying to treat it seriously versus douchebags who are just out there faking stuff? And do we accept that, that's all just part of it? I think it's to be expected. I don't necessarily think that it's part of it. That's where I draw the line for that. I don't think it's part of it. I think that it's to be expected, which I think is how George Hansen had put it in one episode, was this sort of phenomena incites people to do this thing. So to some degree, it's to be expected. But is it really part of it, or is it, and much like every case in Jacques Vallée's recent book, is it the effect? Is it the interpretation that's being put forth as art in some way, in some weird way?
Well, I gotta say, I see a similarity in the disdain for people that, from what I know of Bud and David Jacobs, their attitude is like, we're the only two people on the planet who know the whole truth about what's really going on.
Oh, okay.
And of course, to even approach them with anything else is to be shot down. And it's that sort of, I don't know, that arrogance, that disdain. I mean, it's not as in your face as a Gray Barker whose disdain. I mean, he literally wrote a poem on ufology called something like, I don't remember the name of it, but like ufology is complete bullshit, I think was the name of the title. It was like something like that. Like, this is bullshit. And so I think when you see people as objects, it's easy to hoax them and to say, yeah, fuck you. You want this? Here you go. You're going to get what you want.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But then I think that conscious intent, I just think it's weird that conscious intent of the early days morphed into the unconscious intent of what we have now.
I actually don't know how much of it I believe is unconscious, but
there's that. But then with that goes the trickster. Like with that, the trickster, which was consciously there, they all sort of, that's why they did this. They all thought that this was part of the trickster tapestry. I mean, somewhere in there, again, it morphs, it twists into not even being talked about anymore until Jacques Vallée or George Hansen or whoever unearths it every now and then it gets a little bit of treatment and then goes away again. But mainly, we're dealing with aliens. And why are we dealing with aliens? Because people like Gray Barker sold us aliens way back when, because he promoted crazy people who he knew were crazy, and we're talking about aliens. That's why. Right. I guess that's the case I'm making. We were literally sold aliens by ufology, who knew that it was crazy people selling them aliens. And then somewhere along the way, the researchers became real researchers, and they kept selling aliens, even though all of the evidence is to the contrary. I just, there's something so, I can't quite get my tongue around it, but there's a there, and I don't know what it is yet because I haven't thought it out. So I apologize for the long ramble, folks.
No, I think, I'm trying to think of the way to actually verbalize this. Well, let's look at it from the standpoint of somebody like Gray, who, the question is, did he start out with honest intent with this? Did he start out on a clean slate, on level playing ground, and say, I want to find out what's going on with this, and then realize sometime later that you're not going to get your hands around it? I have to wonder if the absolute frustration of absolutely being denied the answer after all the work has been said and done doesn't just become, like you say, disdain for the field itself and therefore the people in it. It's like, you all think that you know something, so I'm going to give you what you think you know. And that, I think that kind of attitude I can get my head around. I can understand how someone would think that way, but I don't know. I think that you're right in the sense that it has morphed and it's been picked up. The seeds have already been spoiled before they've been put in the ground. So for us to be planting them nowadays is wrong, or for it to have been planted 10 years ago is wrong. And now we've gotten into this situation, like I said earlier, where this is now the expectation has been laid, from the old days. So, but one thing to keep in mind is that Gray Barker was not the entire field, and what those people did with him was not the entire field as a whole. So there's that. I mean, this is not indicative of everything that this field puts out or discovers or anything like that. But I agree. I think there's certainly something there to be said for all of that. But I'm not sure how to verbalize that either.
Well, I mean, now I'm thinking about it, maybe even a case could be made that people like that were so tricksterish or whatever that maybe that was part of the reason the field turned away from the trickster as an explanation, because it produced people that would just mess with you. So it's like, well, I mean, screw it. We need to actually research something here at some point. It can't just be contact these and nuts.
And it's not just that. It's that it is damned aggravating. I mean, neither of us can sit at these mics and lie to the audience and say that we haven't been absolutely pissed off at what this thing presents and how it presents it. It is the damnedest thing that we can't get a handle on. And so to say that it's not aggravating and then it's just absolutely irritating in the way that it behaves and the way that it presents things and then negates itself in the very next breath. I mean, is it almost a throw up your hands and say, yeah, fuck it, let's make some money. If we can't figure it out, so what's the point in going on? What else are we going to do? I mean, I certainly can't sit here and say that I haven't felt completely and thoroughly defeated and aggravated by it and tormented by it. But I don't think that lying to people is the answer. I don't think that does anybody any good. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. It surely has happened. As far as it attracting a certain type of person, I think it does. I think that, again, you've got the small core of people who are being forthright about what they've experienced. And I think you've got a core of people, three tiers. There's the core of people who are being truthful about what they experienced, regardless of whether the incident is true or not. They believe this happened to them. They experienced it, and that's their experience, period. Then you've got the people who are delusional or who desire something like this to be in their life and don't have that. And so therefore they latch onto this like a life ring that somehow gives meaning to what they're doing because maybe they're not doing anything else. And then you have the third tier people, which are capitalists, which I can make some money off of this, or these people are buying into anything. So I could fake something pretty easily and sell it out and make a big story, make a big splash. And that could be done for any number of reasons. The shame of it is we don't have anything to test for motive. So the motive could be money, or it could be notoriety, or it could just be that notion of sitting back and laughing in complete anonymity while throwing something out, like the Guardian case or whatever that no one is like officially copped to. Like there's been a lot of anonymous things submitted over the years that have made big splashes in the media and in the UFO field. And we don't know that someone's not sitting back just having a good laugh at that. And that is their reward for the effort put forth in doing it. So, to me, it always falls into those three categories. That's what I've come across. So much like I don't think that we can pigeonhole this whole thing into one particular thing. I don't think we can pigeonhole the people in the field and their motives for doing what they do and how they do it into one thing either.
Fair enough.
Hello?
Yes. No, fair enough. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, trying to slap together what I just watched in this movie last night with what I see going on now, with what I just read in that Jacques Vallée book. In any event, before we move on, do we want to say anything about Elizabeth and all of this, or does she get off scot-free because, frankly, what's to be said?
I don't think there's anything to be said, really. I mean, it definitely fills in the blanks for me. That's the way I'll put it. It fills in the blanks for me in that.
What do you think that is for her? I mean, is this like the ufological version of Munchausen's by proxy, where you sort of torture somebody to get attention?
I think it's a role. I think it's a role. I think it's. I think that would fall into category 2 for me. It's like there's not much else going on. This is my opinion. This is strictly my opinion. There's not enough going on to suit someone, and so they need the drama and they need that spark and they need that excitement, and this provides that to them, and therefore gives some sort of purpose for rolling out of bed in the morning.
But if he was like 19 at the time, how do you do that to a kid?
Well, see, that's the point. It doesn't matter who the other end is. It's just that there is an other end. That doesn't matter. That doesn't enter. I don't think that even enters into.
It doesn't matter that he's a friend.
Person like
it doesn't
that.
matter
I
that
think
he's
that
your friend's son.
No. This is when you're talking about something like that, this becomes a deeply personal interaction. This becomes a deeply personal delusion. I mean, when I think in terms of my wife, there's nothing that I wouldn't tell her. Nothing. And I think people who play this game to give their life some sort of meaning, I think would actually carry this on into other aspects. Like, I have this going on and this is what this is. And so when you connect the dots between this very personal one-on-one relationship you have with someone that not a lot of people are intruding on, if anyone, and then you take that into another aspect of your life where you feel that you can exert it and then do so, and it's not thrown back at you like you're crazy or whatever, then that just further solidifies the momentum of that story. And that story then starts to hold real credible meaning for that person. And that gives meaning to what they're lacking or what they're missing. And again, this is strictly my opinion. I don't want anybody coming to me saying, well, you're not a psychoanalyst. You're not a therapist. You don't know. I don't know. But I have met several people like that you can tell, aside from this, there's not much going on. And that in a lot of the cases that I've come across where you kind of unwind this and you go, wow, the relationship with so-and-so isn't so great, or the husband or the wife doesn't pay any attention to them, or there's no career drive, there's no professional drive, there's no interest or hobby drive. This becomes the hobby. This becomes what defines them. It makes me sad for those people because I believe everybody's got something that they can be special for. I believe that everyone has a talent or an ability or something like, and it's a shame when something like this, which is so easy to glom onto, becomes the thing because it's built in nothing and it ends badly. These things never end well. They always end up in a mess, and that's where we find ourselves with this. So get a goddamn hobby, buy a bird or something. I don't know. I mean, there's so many things people could be doing is what I'm saying. It's like, damn, this is just so easy, for so many people. It's so easy to be this. And so that's, again, going back to your point, that's where stuff like this comes from. It's people who can't get engaged in anything else. It's people who, aren't really experiencing anything, or may have experienced something very small at one point in your life, but then they see this and they're fascinated by it, and then they want to become part of it. And then that's the genesis of it, to me, that's where the genesis of that starts. But in reality, it starts with, if they could step back and look at themselves, they would see, oh, well, I'm doing this because this part of me is lacking, or that part of me, my life is not fulfilled. And so I'm just filling in the blank. It does become addictive. And that's, in essence, what Brian said. It became obsessive. It became an addiction of sorts. And that's what it becomes. Because in some weird way, some psychological way, it's fulfilling a need that is missing. And that's where I think it comes from.
Very good. Well, I think we have exhausted our time. I have nothing to add to that. I think that was well said.
Do you think it's true or false or?
I think that's true. I think
it's good to get feedback.
I think you're being far more diplomatic than I would be in a way. I mean, I think there's something sick about somebody who would do that to a friend and a kid that's beyond just get a life. I mean, I think there might actually be something worth seeing a real therapist about, not your online pseudotherapist.
Yeah, well, I don't doubt that. I mean, yeah, certainly. I mean, in some cases, you could see it as abusive or controlling or manipulating. Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure that does happen, but I don't know that that's every case.
No, I'm saying specifically.
And so I've got to take the broad approach and say, well, I see. That's where I fall short because I don't know anything about her life aside from one hobby, and so how can I say? There's no way I can really say that.
Well, you make it sound like one hobby. But what's her hobby? Her hobby is going online and bullshitting people to the extent that it fucks with their lives, to the extent that it ruins them for a time.
Well, that's the product. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
You
say this
product,
like it's
sure.
Well, sure, that's the product.
But
well, killing and death is the product, but
no. I'm not making light of that. I'm not making light of that. Don't paint me like that. What I'm saying is that the other hobby that we've been told about that this woman has is writing fiction, and so it's a glom on. It's a carryover from the same thing. Only now it's dealing with real life characters. So is there something not right about that? Oh, yeah, there's something not right about that. There's something not right about that that is correct. Yeah, there should be a therapist involved, in my opinion, at least. But again, I don't know enough to level that kind of thing. All I know is that, yeah, did it fuck people up? Sure it did. That's the end result. Of course that's going to be the end result. Like I said, these things never end well for anyone. But do I know that that's absolute malicious intent? No. Do I know that was planned? No. Was it? It could have been. But I can't in good conscience level judgment like that because I just simply don't know.
Well, it doesn't have to be planned to be malicious intent.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be planned to be malicious intent?
No, I think at some point,
what do you mean?
Even if things just sort of get out of control, you have the option of stepping out of the situation and not keeping it going, and certainly not keeping it going with a new set of people. I mean, it seems to just keep going and going. I mean, even now, even as we're speaking, he's probably still talking to her about all of this stuff right now and how we just don't understand, and she's reconfirming, yeah, you're right. They just don't understand. I mean, it's still going on, you know? I mean, at what point what point does it become malicious if you're not even willing to step back and go, you know what? Sorry, this got way out of hand for years. I mean, that's malicious.
Well, I think at that point you have to define yourself. Well, I think you have to, again, I mean, I think you've got to look at what is the nature of addiction with this. And I mean, it's addiction. And I don't paint that as a disease, don't get me wrong, but habitual behavior, psychological habitual behavior. And so that becomes not the option. The option is not to come out of that mask that you put on to deal with people in this field and to lie to them and to cause all of this uproar. I mean, to take off that mask is then for people to see the real you. And the whole point of this whole narrative is to be someone else. You get where I'm saying that? I mean, the point of this is to be something else, to be more. And to step out of that is to take responsibility. And that's not something that happens here. You know, I hate to say for somebody like that, it's not an option because I don't know. But I mean, for people that I've known, you could scream in their face, "You're lying to me. You're lying to me. I've done this." And they will not back down. I mean, to back down is to show the cards, and the cards are the thing that you most covet. That mask is the thing that you most hide behind. And to reveal that is not something that someone screaming in your face to do is going to do. That's not going to work. You know, the heroin addict is not going to take his baby crying on the ground because he hasn't bought food for the baby in a week. That baby starving on the ground doesn't compute to his ill behavior. So if you can get your head around that, then now transfer that kind of real extreme, comparison to this. It's the same addictive quality, I think, for these people that they feel this absolute drive to not be who they are. The whole game is based upon the facade or the mask, just like the whole game for an addict of heroin is based upon the needle, the drug. That's all that matters. And so to go, oh, I've hurt people, I really need to. No, that doesn't work for a heroin addict, and that doesn't work for these people. I mean, that's, again, all strictly my opinion based on just my own direct experience. So,
and you think you don't understand Christian?
Well, I don't. This has just been my direct experience with these people. It's like you can't force their hand because they won't cop to it. And to me, there's something not only sad about the outcome of a situation like that, but it's sad that there are people that are that unfulfilled. That to me is that's a very sad thing. And, you know, the only thing I could say to future people who are thinking about it, interested in this and possibly putting on a mask and playing a game is, you know, don't play the game, because it's not, in the end, it's not going to fulfill you. It's not going to give you anything of what you really need. The only thing it's going to do is to damage other people. And I don't think that anyone wants to be, I don't think anybody really wants to be the person who damages people, especially not in a way like we've seen with this.
All right. Well, all of that said, Brian, I hope, remains friends of the show, and I'd like to, he had mentioned talking to us privately. I hope that happens. I don't want to give the impression, any negative impression, because where he is now is not a reflection of, you know, what I was talking about, which is what he was doing then.
And he, let's be frontal about this, is that he did admit, I know that's really screwed up. So he knows. Yeah,
he knows it was screwed up.
Where he was, and he knows where he is now.
I mean, I would just love to know what more is going on with him. Maybe we can compare notes for the whole spiritual thing and see if we've got some similarities, and maybe I'll know what's in store for me. Maybe voices are yet to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, thanks for having the cojones to come on the show and do what you did. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that this once again gives a little bit of peace to Emma Woods.
Yes.
Maybe she can go on with life and feel, I don't know, that little sigh that you get when it's like, finally that happened, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because even though, you know, we did a show with her and all that, we've sort of been defending her or, you know, figuring out this, trying to unravel this case. I mean, she has been a lone voice in this, and now she's not. So that's a huge deal. Yeah. And like I said, rest well, young Emma.
Yes.
Now, do we want to move on to the book contest?
Yeah, the book week 2.
Gee Whiz won the first book, which was Ghost
of
Gettysburg. Congratulations, Gee Whiz.
Yes, and the answer to last week's question was Zihaz.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, this week the question is going to be 2-part because they're both sort of easy, but maybe we'll make it a little harder. We'll make it a 2-part question. July 1st, 1863. Confederate General Robert E. Lee, everybody knows his name, right? Led his troops from northern Virginia up to south central Pennsylvania to a small rural town called Gettysburg. He was confronted there by a Union general. By what name? Is the first part.
Colonel Sanders.
No, that'd be incorrect.
General, you said.
That's correct. General. A Union general. What was a Union general's name that he was confronted with in Gettysburg? And after a 3-day battle that ensued that was extremely violent and ultimately very bloody, one of the bloodiest in American history, there were 51,000 American casualties. And there was one civilian casualty. And what was the civilian casualty's name?
General Grievous. I'm still on the generals.
No, it's not General Grievous.
Oh.
So that's 2 questions. What general was General Lee? What Union general was he met with at Gettysburg? And also, out of the 51,000 American casualties, there was one civilian casualty, and what was their name? And I'll just give you a little hint. That civilian casualty is now a very famous haunting in the town of Gettysburg. So whoever can get those first, subscribers only, post them in the subscriber only message board, and you will win a book hand signed by Mr. Jeremy
Mark Nesbitt.
That's correct. You win.
Yay, I got one. Yes, and it will be, of course, the same book contest thread as last week's.
Right.
So there's that. Benedict Arnold, that was the casualty.
No.
No.
But I do like the eggs.
If you want me to do anything by way of introduction, then, let me know.
Okay, can you be like the master of disaster? Or something cool like that?
Sure, yes.
Yeah.
You're going to fit right in, trust me.